My name is Antoine. I had just turned 18, and in a few weeks, I was going to step onto the campus of my dream college. Most people would be excited about the dorms, the dining hall, the freedom, or the chance to finally do laundry badly without parental supervision. Me? I was excited because I was about to join the same basketball team as Chris. Yes, that Chris. The captain I had watched 1 year ago in a tournament that basically grabbed my future by the collar and said, "This one. Pick this college." Before that game, I was still undecided. I had a few schools interested in me because of my state tournament performance, and honestly, I was proud of that. Not in an arrogant way. More like, I had worked hard, my legs had suffered, my sneakers had died heroic deaths, and I wanted someone to notice. But then I saw Chris play, and suddenly, every other school started looking blurry. Chris wasn't just good at basketball. A lot of players were good. Some could shoot. Some could dunk. Some could run so fast they looked like they were personally offended by gravity. Chris was different. He was only a sophomore then, but he already carried himself like the court trusted him first, and everyone else followed after. He was the kind of captain who made the whole court listen. One hand raised, and his teammates shifted. One glance, and someone cut toward the basket. One sharp movement, and the entire team trusted him like he had already seen the next 3 seconds before anyone else did. I watched him on my laptop in my room, sitting cross-legged on my bed with a bowl of cereal I completely forgot to eat. By the second quarter, the cereal had turned into a sad swamp, and I was too busy staring at the screen to care. Because Chris was amazing. Focused. Controlled. Cold in that scary captain way. And also, fine. Very fine. I am saying that with deep respect for the sport. I'm gay. I've known that about myself for a long time. So this was not some dramatic discovery. I knew my type. I knew what made my heart act stupid. And Chris? Chris looked like someone had built my dream boyfriend in a basketball lab, and then gave him leadership skills just to make my life harder. Tall. Serious. Impossible to ignore. The kind of guy who looked like he never wasted words, which naturally made me want to hear every single one of them. That was normal. Probably. After watching that game, I told myself I chose the college because it had a strong basketball program, good academics, and real opportunities for my future. All true. Mostly true. Fine, technically true. But if I trained harder after that, if I ran extra drills until my lungs felt like they were filing complaints, if I kept replaying Chris's games while pretending I was studying his court vision and not the way his hair stuck to his forehead after a timeout. That was for my future. Definitely my future. Not because of Chris. Absolutely not. Then the semifinal happened. I watched it from my room too, laptop open, hands gripping my blanket like I had any power over the scoreboard. Chris's team was down by 1. There were only a few seconds left. The gym on the screen was roaring so loudly that even through my cheap speakers, I felt it in my chest. Chris had the ball, and I relaxed for half a second, because of course he did. This was Chris, the captain, the guy who made pressure look like something he could fold and put in his pocket. He drove past one defender, then another. A teammate opened up near the corner. I saw it. The pass was there, but Chris didn't pass. He took the shot himself. The ball rose. For one perfect, terrible second, everything froze. Then it hit the rim. Once. Twice. And bounced out. The buzzer screamed. The other team exploded. Chris stood in the middle of the court without moving. People rushed around him. His teammates dropped their heads. The crowd became a blur of noise and color. But Chris just stood there, frozen under the lights, like that missed shot had gone straight through his chest. And my heart did something embarrassing. It hurt for him. Not in a normal, wow, that's sad, kind of way. More like, oh no. Chris, don't look like that. Please don't look like that. I am 18, emotionally unstable, and not prepared to watch my future husband suffer through a sports tragedy. Future husband was dramatic. Probably. But seeing him like that made something twist inside me. I wanted to reach through the screen, grab his hand, and tell him one missed shot didn't erase who he was. I wanted to tell him he was still the captain who made me believe in that team. I wanted to say, wait for me. I'm coming. I'll stand beside you. Which was insane, because Chris didn't even know I existed. But that night, While he stood broken under the bright lights of that court, I made myself a quiet promise. I would become good enough to stand next to him. Not behind him, not in his shadow, next to him. I thought I was going there to support the captain I admired. I had no idea that when Chris finally saw me, he wouldn't see someone who came because of him. He would see someone coming to replace him. I learned very quickly that dreams are much safer when they stay on a laptop screen. Because on a screen, Chris could be perfect. On a screen, he was all sharp movements, clean passes, cold focus, and unfairly attractive sweat. In real life? In real life, Chris was standing across the college gym with his arms crossed, looking at me like I had insulted his shoes, his team, and the entire sport of basketball. It was move-in week, a few days before classes officially started. Most freshmen were still trying to figure out where the dining hall was and how to make their dorm beds look less depressing. I should have been doing the same. Instead, I was walking into the gym for an early team meeting and voluntary open run with my duffel bag on my shoulder, pretending I was calm. I was not calm. I was very far from calm. Coach clapped his hands once, and the sound cracked through the gym. "Bring it in, guys." The players gathered near half court. Some looked curious. Some looked tired. One guy was still half asleep and drinking from a giant water bottle like it contained his last will to live. Then Coach put a hand on my shoulder. "This is Antoine," he said. "Incoming freshman. Some of you probably saw him in the state tournament last season. He's got good instincts, strong court vision, and he's going to help us this year." A few guys nodded. Someone said, "Freshman beast, huh?" Another guy grinned. No pressure. I smiled like a normal person. At least, I hoped it looked normal. Inside, my soul had already left my body and was sitting in the bleachers with popcorn. Because Chris was looking at me. Not glancing. Looking. His eyes were cold, steady, and impossible to read. He stood a little apart from everyone else, his practice jersey hanging loose over his shoulders. Dark hair slightly messy like he had walked out of a sports documentary about emotional damage. My brain whispered, "Say something cool." My mouth almost listened. I had prepared for this moment. I really had. The night before, while my roommate was unpacking sneakers and complaining about the Wi-Fi, I had practiced one simple sentence in my head. "Nice to meet you, Captain." Simple, respectful, smooth. A sentence used by normal athletes who did not have a dangerous crush on their team captain. But when Chris's eyes landed on mine, all my preparation collapsed like a folding chair at a cheap graduation party. So I just nodded. "Hey," I said. "Hey." That was it. One syllable. Truly inspiring. Future leaders of America, take notes. Chris gave me the smallest nod back. Not rude exactly. Worse. Polite in a way that felt like a locked door. Coach started pairing us for warm-ups, and I tried to focus. This was basketball. I knew basketball. Basketball was safe. Basketball did not require me to explain why my heart had started acting like Chris had personally invited it to prom. We began with passing drills, then transition work, then a short scrimmage. And for a while, I forgot to panic. The ball moved, and my body moved with it. I cut left, caught a pass, sent it behind my back to one of the wings, then sprinted toward the corner. A defender shifted too late. I got the ball back, took the shot, and watched it drop clean through the net. The sound was beautiful. The kind of sound that made every hour of practice feel worth it. "Okay, freshman," someone shouted. Another player laughed and slapped my shoulder as we ran back. State tournament wasn't a fluke. I should have felt proud. I did. A little. But my eyes went to Chris before I could stop myself. He stood near the free throw line, one hand resting on his hip, the other gripping the ball. His face didn't change much, but his jaw tightened. Just a little. Most people would have missed it. Unfortunately, I had watched too many videos of him to qualify as most people. Chris checked the ball and drove toward me on the next possession. Fast. Hard. Like he wanted to remind everyone there was already a captain on this court. I moved to cut him off. He spun past me, but I recovered just enough to make his angle bad. His shot hit the rim and bounced out. The gym went quiet for half a second. Not completely quiet, just enough. Chris caught the rebound himself, his expression flat. "Good defense," one of the guys told me. I wished he hadn't. Because Chris heard it. His eyes flicked toward me again, colder this time. And suddenly, I understood. He didn't see the kid who had watched his games in secret and trained harder because of him. He didn't see someone who wanted to stand beside him. He saw the freshman everyone was looking at. The new weapon. The state tournament kid. The proof that maybe, after one missed shot in the semifinal, the team could find another light to follow. Coach blew the whistle and called for water. The guys walked toward the sideline, talking and laughing. Someone bumped my shoulder and said, "You're going to be fun to watch this year." I smiled. But across the gym, Chris turned away before I could meet his eyes. And for the first time since choosing this school, I realized something that made my chest feel tight. I had come here because of Chris. But Chris looked at me like I had come to replace him. After that first open run, I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe Chris looked at everyone like that. Maybe his face just naturally said, "I don't like you, your shoes, or the oxygen near you." Some people had resting nice face. Chris had resting final boss face. Unfortunately, the more practices we had, the harder it became to lie to myself. Because Chris wasn't just cold toward me. He was different from the captain I remembered. The Chris I had watched on my laptop moved like every second on the court belonged to him. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. He saw the floor, raised one hand, and somehow everyone understood where to go. But the Chris in front of me kept arriving half a second late to himself. It was small at first. During a shooting drill, coach called out, "Same spot. Left wing. Game speed." Chris stepped into position near the arc. My stomach tightened before I understood why. It was almost the same angle as the shot from the semifinal. The ball came to him. Chris caught it cleanly. For 1 second, he looked normal. Knees bent, shoulders square, eyes on the rim. Then his fingers tightened around the ball. Just a little. His shot still went up. It even went in. Swish. A beautiful shot. A shot most players would be proud of. But Chris didn't look proud. He looked annoyed, like making it now only reminded him that he hadn't made it then. Coach watched him for a beat too long. Chris noticed. His jaw locked. I noticed both of them noticing each other, because apparently my new hobby was noticing every emotional crack in my team captain. Healthy? No. Useful for understanding the plot of my own life? Very. The next few days were worse. Chris still called plays. Still corrected guys when they missed rotations. Still stood at the center of every huddle like he belonged there. But his voice had changed. Before, I imagined his voice would be calm and firm, the kind that made people straighten up without being scared. Now it came out sharper. "Move sooner." Chris snapped at one of the guards during transition work. The guy lifted both hands. I did move. You hesitated. Coach blew the whistle from the sideline. Reset. The word cut through the gym. Chris turned away, wiping sweat from his face with the bottom of his jersey. I should not have noticed his stomach for half a second. I definitely noticed. Then I immediately hated myself because he was clearly going through emotional destruction, and my brain had chosen that moment to act like a badly behaved romance novel. Focus, Antoine. A captain is suffering. Stop observing his abs. We reset the play. This time, I cut through the lane and got open. One of the guys passed to me. I caught it, drove in, and kicked it back out to the corner for an easy 3. The shot dropped. A few players clapped. Nice read. Coach called. I nodded, trying to keep my face casual. Inside, I was pleased. Of course I was. I had worked hard to play this level of basketball. But before I could enjoy it, Chris's voice came from behind me. "You're forcing the pace." I turned. Chris stood there with both hands on his hips, sweat glistening at his temples, eyes cold enough to lower the gym temperature. I tried to sound calm. It was an open kick-out. "It worked because he made the shot," Chris said. "Doesn't mean it was the right read." The guy in the corner looked between us like he had accidentally walked into a family argument. Coach didn't step in right away, so I swallowed the first answer that came to mind. The first answer was not respectful. The second answer was barely respectful. I chose silence, which was very mature of me and also extremely painful. Chris looked away first, but not like he was finished. More like he had decided I wasn't worth the rest of the argument. That should have made me angry. It did. But underneath that, there was something worse. I was disappointed. Not because Chris criticized me. Captains did that. Good players handled it. I was disappointed because every time he looked at me, I could feel him trying to turn me into the enemy. and I didn't want to be his enemy. That was terribly inconvenient, considering he looked especially attractive when he was being unfair, which felt rude of him. If someone was going to hurt my feelings, the least he could do was look less like a tragic sports prince while doing it. By the end of practice, Chris had corrected me 4 times. Once for moving too early, once for not calling the screen loudly enough, once for passing when he said I should have finished, once for finishing when he said I should have passed. At that point, I was starting to suspect the real problem was that I existed. When coach finally ended practice, the guys spread out toward the benches. Sneakers squeaked. Water bottles cracked open. Someone complained about cafeteria food already, even though most freshmen had only been on campus for a week. I bent down to retie my shoe, mostly so I could avoid looking at Chris. That was when I heard one of the sophomores murmur, "Captain's been rough lately." Another player answered quietly, "Yeah, since the semifinal." The words landed heavy. I glanced across the gym. Chris stood alone near the free throw line, spinning the ball slowly in his hands. No one was blaming him out loud. No one had to. The silence around him did it for them. And suddenly, I saw it clearly. Chris wasn't angry because I was good. He was angry because every good thing I did sounded, to him, like the team moving on. Like they were finding a new future before he had forgiven himself for ruining the old one. For a second, I wanted to walk over and say something. Anything. You're still Chris. They still need you. I didn't come here to take your place. But Chris looked up right then, and his eyes met mine. Cold. Guarded. Warning me not to come closer. So I stayed where I was. Because maybe Chris had lost his voice as captain. But somehow, even broken, he still knew exactly how to push me away. The next practice was supposed to be simple. At least, that was what coach said. "Today we're cleaning up our half-court sets," he announced, standing near the sideline with a whistle around his neck and a clipboard tucked under one arm. "No hero ball. No forcing. Read the floor, trust the pass, make the right decision." I tried very hard not to look at Chris when coach said hero ball. I failed. Chris stood a few feet away from me, rolling his shoulders like the words hadn't touched him at all. His face was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that looked less like peace and more like someone had locked a storm in a closet and told it to be quiet. Unfortunately, even emotionally damaged, he still looked ridiculous. His hair was damp from warm-ups. His jaw was tight. His practice jersey clung to his shoulders in a way that made me briefly consider filing a formal complaint with the athletic department. Reason for complaint: team captain is distracting freshmen from personal growth and basketball fundamentals. Very serious issue. Then coach split us into groups. "Chris, run first unit," coach said. "Antoine, I want you leading the second group." My head snapped up. So did Chris's. For 1 second, the whole gym felt like it held its breath. It wasn't a big deal. Not really. Coaches tried different combinations all the time, especially before the season officially started. Incoming freshmen got tested. Upperclassmen got pushed. That was normal. But normal things could still hurt. And Chris looked like that sentence had hit him right under the ribs. He didn't argue. He didn't even blink much. He just nodded once and jogged to his group. That almost made it worse. I wanted him to snap at me. I wanted him to roll his eyes. I wanted something sharp enough that I could be annoyed back. Instead, he stayed quiet. And somehow, quiet Chris was harder to survive than angry Chris. The drill started. I tried to focus on my group. I really did. I called the set, watched the defense shift, motioned for one of the wings to cut baseline, then passed to the high post. The ball came back to me. I drove, pulled the defender in, and kicked it out. The shot dropped. "Good read," coach called. A couple of guys clapped. One of them bumped my shoulder and said, "Man, you see things fast." I smiled because that was what normal people did when complimented. Inside, I was screaming, "Please stop praising me where Chris can hear it." Across the court, Chris dribbled slowly near the top of the key. His group was waiting for him to call the next movement, but for half a second, he just stared at the floor. Then coach blew the whistle. "Chris, quicker. Don't hold it." Chris's hand tightened around the ball. There it was again. That tiny crack. He nodded and restarted the play, but his rhythm was off. He drove too early, got trapped near the elbow, and forced a pass through a gap that wasn't really there. The ball got tipped loose and rolled toward midcourt. No one said anything. That was the terrible part. Nobody laughed. Nobody groaned. Nobody blamed him. The silence just spread across the gym like spilled water. Chris bent down, picked up the ball, and tossed it back to Coach. "Again," he said. His voice was flat. Coach studied him for a second. "Take a breath first." I said again. The gym went still. My chest tightened. Because that wasn't captain confidence. That was pain wearing Chris's voice like a jersey. Coach didn't raise his voice. He just looked at Chris the way coaches looked at players they cared about, but didn't want to embarrass. "Fine," Coach said. Again. The next rep was worse. Chris tried to drive through two defenders, even though his teammate was wide open on the wing. He got bumped, lost balance, and the ball slipped out of his hand. The whistle cut through the gym. "Chris," Coach said, sharper this time. "That's enough. You're forcing it." Chris stood under the basket, breathing hard. Sweat ran down the side of his face. His shoulders rose and fell like he was holding back words that would burn if they came out. One of the seniors stepped forward. "Cap, you good?" Chris's eyes flashed. "I'm fine." No one believed him, especially me. And I hated that I could see him so clearly now. The anger, the shame, the way every mistake seemed to drag him back to that semifinal shot. The way every compliment thrown at me sounded, to him, like the team finding a replacement before he had even forgiven himself. Practice ended with everyone quieter than usual. The guys started heading toward the locker room in small groups. Someone joked about ordering pizza later. Someone else complained about an early morning lecture. Normal college athlete things. Easy things. Then I heard two players behind me. "Antoine's legit," one of them said quietly. "Yeah," the other answered. "If he keeps playing like that, we might actually have a shot this year." They didn't mean anything cruel. That was what made it cruel. I looked across the gym. Chris had heard them. Of course he had. He was standing near the bench, towel in one hand, eyes lowered. His face didn't change, but his fingers twisted the towel so tightly that his knuckles paled. For one stupid second, I wanted to walk over, grab the towel from his hands, and tell him to stop punishing himself. I wanted to say, "They're not replacing you." I wanted to say, "I'm not replacing you." I wanted to say something even worse, like, "Please don't look so lonely," because it's doing dangerous things to my chest. Instead, I adjusted my duffel bag and followed the others out. Because Chris had made it very clear that my concern was the last thing he wanted. Later that night, I realized I had left my hoodie in the gym. At least, that was the excuse I gave myself. During preseason, our team keycards still worked late enough for players to grab gear or get extra shots up, so getting back into the athletic building wasn't the problem. The problem was that I knew exactly who might still be there. The campus was quieter by then. The sidewalks were mostly empty, the air warm in that late summer way that made everything smell like grass, pavement, and the beginning of something new. When I reached the athletic building, one strip of light was still glowing through the gym doors. I stopped. Inside, the court was almost dark except for the overhead lights above one basket. Chris was there alone. He stood at the left wing. The same angle. The semifinal angle. He shot. The ball hit the rim and bounced out. He chased it down. Shot again. Missed again. The sound echoed through the empty gym. Thud. Bounce. Squeak. Shot. Mississippi. Again. And again. And again. It didn't look like practice. It looked like punishment. My hand stayed on the doorframe. Any smart person would have turned around. Any respectful teammate would have given him space. Any freshman with a functioning survival instinct would have remembered that Chris already disliked him and left immediately. Unfortunately, I had never been smart when it came to Chris. So I stepped into the gym. The sound of my sneakers against the floor was small. Too small for the way Chris turned around like I had just fired a starter pistol behind him. The ball bounced once beside his foot, rolled a few inches, and stopped. For a second, neither of us said anything. The gym felt huge around us. Empty bleachers, dim lights, that polished wood floor reflecting the white glow above the basket. It looked like the kind of place where people either became legends or completely fell apart. Chris looked like he was trying very hard not to do the second one. "What are you doing here?" he asked. His voice was low, rough from exhaustion. I lifted my hoodie slightly, like an idiot presenting evidence in court. Forgot this. Chris glanced at it, then back at me. His expression said he did not believe me, my hoodie, or possibly the legal system. Fair. I'll leave, I said. That would have been the smart choice. A graceful exit. Mature. Respectful. Very college athlete with boundaries of me. Instead, my feet stayed where they were, because apparently my body had formed a secret alliance with my worst decisions. Chris turned away first and picked up the ball. Then leave. He shot again. The ball hit the back rim and bounced out hard. Chris caught it before it got far, dribbled once, and reset at the same spot. Left wing. Semifinal angle. Again. My chest tightened. You've been doing that for a while, I said. Chris didn't look at me. I didn't ask for commentary. Good. Because if I were commentating, I'd probably say your form is getting worse because you're angry. The ball stopped in his hands. For one terrifying moment, I thought, congratulations, Antoine. You have chosen death in a college gym after hours. Very poetic. Chris slowly turned his head. What did you say? I should have apologized. Instead, I stepped closer. Not too close. Just enough that the space between us stopped feeling safe. You heard me. His eyes narrowed. You think because coach likes you, you can talk to me like that? Oh, there it was. The thing sitting between us, ugly and sharp. I swallowed. My heart was beating too fast, but I forced my face to stay calm. Cool Antoine. Normal Antoine. The Antoine who definitely was not internally screaming, because Chris looked furious and exhausted and unfairly beautiful under bad gym lighting. No, I said. I think I can talk to you like that because nobody else will. Chris let out a humorless laugh. You don't know anything about me. I know you keep taking that shot like missing it enough times will change what happened. His face shifted. Tiny. Almost nothing. But I saw it. The words hit somewhere deeper than his pride. Chris bounced the ball once. Hard. The sound cracked through the gym. You should go. I didn't. Because I remembered the Chris on my laptop. The one who commanded the court like fear was something other people had. I remembered the way his teammates had trusted him. I remembered that. Missed shot, his frozen face, the way my stupid heart had decided a person could be worth following before that person even knew my name. And now he was standing in front of me, hiding behind anger like it was the only jersey he still knew how to wear. So I pushed. You're scared, I said. Chris went completely still. I kept going before my courage could run away without me. You're scared to shoot. Scared to pass. Scared coach is testing me because he doesn't trust you anymore. Scared the team looks at me and sees a way to move on. Chris's hand tightened around the ball. I heard my own voice sharpen, and some part of me begged myself to stop. I did not stop. The Chris I watched last year wouldn't play like this. His eyes flashed. I took another breath. That Chris made everyone on the court believe they could win. This Chris just looks like he's waiting for proof that he's already lost. The silence after that was awful. Heavy. Alive. Chris stared at me like I had slapped him. For a second, guilt punched through my chest. I wanted to take it back. I wanted to say I didn't mean it that way. I wanted to explain that I wasn't trying to hurt him. I was trying to find him. But Chris moved first. He threw the ball. It slammed against the padded wall beneath the basket and bounced away with a violent thud. I flinched. Chris didn't even look at me after that. He just walked toward the locker room, shoulders stiff, hands curled at his sides. I stood there under the cold lights, breathing too fast. Smart Antoine would have let him go. Respectful Antoine would have understood he had pushed too far. Unfortunately, there was also a third Antoine. The one who had watched Chris break through a screen and promised, like a dramatic fool, that he would stand beside him. That Antoine picked up the ball, set it gently on the rack, and followed him. Chris, I called. He didn't stop. The locker room door swung open, then almost closed behind him. I caught it before it shut. The air inside was colder, smelling faintly of soap, metal lockers, and old sweat. Chris stood a few steps in, his back to me, one hand braced against a row of lockers. Don't follow me, he said. His voice wasn't loud. That made it worse. I stepped inside anyway. Then stop running. The words left my mouth before my survival instincts could tackle them. Chris turned around slowly. The locker room was almost empty, lit by those cold fluorescent lights that made everyone look tired, guilty, or like they were about to confess to a crime. Rows of metal lockers stood on both sides, gray and silent. Somewhere behind us, the gym door clicked shut. Chris stared at me, not like a captain looking at a teammate, like a storm deciding where to strike first. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he said. His voice was low, but it hit harder than shouting. I swallowed. "Then tell me." Chris let out a sharp breath, almost a laugh, but there was nothing funny in it. "You don't get to walk in here, play a few good drills, and act like you understand this team." "I'm not acting like I understand the team." "Then what are you doing?" I should have said something calm, something mature, something that proved I was a responsible freshman athlete and not a person whose heart had been making terrible decisions since the first time he saw Chris on a screen. Instead, I said, "I'm trying to understand you." That was apparently the wrong answer. Chris stepped closer. My body remembered it was supposed to be intimidated. My brain, however, immediately betrayed me. Because Chris was close. Very close. Close enough for me to see the sweat still damp at his hairline. Close enough to notice the small scar near his eyebrow I had never seen in game footage. Close enough for my heart to stand up, throw its clipboard in the air, and announce that it was resigning from basic function. This was bad. This was extremely bad. Chris looked furious, and somehow my first useful thought was, wow, he is even more attractive when he's about to ruin my life. I had serious problems. "You don't know me," Chris said, each word tight. "I know you're scared." His eyes flashed. Before I could breathe, Chris moved. He stepped forward fast enough that I backed up on instinct. My shoulder hit the lockers with a metallic bang that echoed through the room. The sound made both of us freeze. Chris was right in front of me now, one hand braced against the locker beside my head, his face inches from mine. He wasn't touching me, not really, but the space between us had disappeared. I should have been terrified. I was. A little. Mostly, I was trying not to pass away because the captain I had admired for a year was close enough that I could count his eyelashes, which felt disrespectful to the seriousness of the moment. "Say that again," Chris said. His voice was rough. My throat went dry. "Cool, Antoine. Be cool. Do not stare at his mouth. Do not wonder why his anger smells faintly like soap and mint. Do not die in a locker room before the semester even starts." I lifted my chin. "You're scared," I said again, softer this time. "And I hate seeing you like this." Chris's expression cracked for half a second. Not enough for anyone else to notice. But I noticed. Of course I noticed. I had been noticing him since before he knew my name. "You think I came here to take your place," I said, my voice shaking despite everything I did to stop it. But I didn't. Chris didn't move. I forced myself to keep going. "I watched you play last year. Before the semifinal. Before all of this." My hands curled into fists at my sides. "You were the reason I chose this school." His eyes changed. The anger didn't disappear, but something slid underneath it. Confusion. Shock. Maybe pain. I took one breath, then another. "I wanted to play for this team because of you, Chris. Not coach. Not the gym. Not the uniform." I laughed once, weak and embarrassed. "Okay, the uniform is nice, but that is not the point." Chris blinked. "Great. Wonderful." I was making jokes while emotionally bleeding. Very on brand. "The point is," I continued, quieter now, "you made me want to become good enough to stand beside you. And then I got here, and you looked at me like I was the person stealing your life." His jaw tightened. I saw his hand press harder against the locker. "I'm not your enemy," I said. "I never wanted to be." For a second, the room went silent. So silent I could hear both of us breathing. Chris was still too close. His eyes were still locked on mine. My heart was pounding so hard it felt less like an organ and more like a basketball being dribbled badly inside my chest. And then I made the stupidest decision of my life. I kissed him. It was short. Too short to be romantic. Too sudden to be smart. My lips touched his, and for one impossible second, the entire world stopped making noise. Then reality hit me so hard I almost staggered. I pulled back immediately. Chris didn't move. His eyes were wide. My stomach dropped. "Oh no. Oh no, Antoine. That was not cool. That was not calm. That was not mysterious freshman energy. That was emotional self-destruction with lips." For one terrifying second, I thought he was going to hit me. And honestly, maybe I deserved it. I shut my eyes and waited. 1 second. 2. 3. Nothing happened. No shove. No fist. No shouting. When I opened my eyes, Chris was just staring at me. His chest rose and fell too fast. His lips were slightly parted. His eyes were full of shock, anger, and something else I couldn't name. I wanted to apologize. I wanted to explain that I hadn't planned it, that I had admired him for so long, that watching him destroy himself had been tearing something open inside me. But before I could force a single word out, Chris stepped back. The space between us returned. Cold, huge, painful. He looked at me one last time, like he didn't know whether to hate me or hate himself for not moving sooner. Then Chris turned around and walked out of the locker room without saying anything. The door swung shut behind him. I stayed there against the lockers, breathing like I had just run full-court sprints. If he had yelled, maybe I could have handled it. If he had pushed me away, at least I would have known what he felt. But Chris left me with silence. Just the cold locker room, the echo of his footsteps, and the terrible truth that I had finally touched the person I admired most, only to watch him walk away. I did not sleep that night. Technically, I was in bed. My body was under a blanket. My phone was charging on the desk. My roommate was snoring softly from the other side of the room like a man with no regrets, no emotional collapse, and no history of kissing his team captain in a locker room. Must be nice. I stared at the ceiling until the little cracks in the paint started looking like a map of my bad decisions. By 2 in the morning, I had replayed the kiss so many times my brain probably qualified as a security camera. Chris's hand beside my head, his eyes on mine, the sharp sound of my back hitting the locker. The second my mouth moved before common sense could throw itself in front of me. Then the worst part. Chris walking away. No shouting. No insult. No answer. Just silence. I pulled the blanket over my face and whispered, "Great job, Antoine." Very cool. Very mysterious. Definitely the behavior of a normal freshman athlete. My roommate mumbled in his sleep and rolled over. Even unconscious people were judging me now. The next morning, I walked into the athletic building with the energy of someone approaching a crime scene. Practice wasn't until 10, but players started showing up early. Some guy stretched near the baseline. Someone had music playing quietly from a speaker until coach walked in and gave it one look. The music died immediately. Very powerful man, coach. I kept my head down while tying my shoes, telling myself to act normal. Normal meant breathing. Normal meant not staring at the locker room door like Chris might come out wearing a sign that said, "This freshman kissed me, and now everything is weird." Then he walked in. Chris. Black practice shorts. Gray team shirt. Hair still damp like he had showered before coming. Face calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that made my stomach drop because it said he had locked every feeling behind a door and thrown the key into the nearest emotional lake. He didn't look at me. Not once. Which was fine. Completely fine. Wonderful even. Who needed eye contact? Overrated. Dangerous. Bad for the knees. I stood up too quickly and nearly tripped over my own foot. One of the juniors, Marcus, caught my elbow. "You good, freshman?" "Yeah," I said, with the confidence of a liar and the balance of a newborn deer. "Just stretching." Marcus looked at my shoes. "With your face?" "New method." He laughed and walked away. I risked one glance at Chris. Mistake. He was talking to coach near the sideline, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He looked focused, controlled, almost back to normal. Except he wouldn't look at me. And somehow that was worse than anger. During warm-ups, coach paired us in separate lines. Chris worked with the guards on one side. I worked with the wings on the other. The court felt huge, but I still knew where he was at all times. That was humiliating. I could be dribbling, catching, cutting, listening to coach, and some useless part of my brain still whispered, "Chris just moved near the top of the key." Thank you, brain. Very helpful. Please apply this awareness to homework someday. Practice itself was strange. Chris didn't correct me unfairly anymore. He didn't snap when I made a good pass. He didn't glare when coach praised me. He just acted like I was any other player, which should have been a relief. It wasn't, because Chris had never treated me like any other player before. He had treated me like a threat, like a problem. like something he couldn't stop watching even when he hated it. Now he gave me space. Respectful space. Awful space. Halfway through a defensive drill, I got trapped between two players near the sideline. I pivoted, looking for an outlet, but both passing lanes closed fast. Before I could force something stupid, Chris appeared. No warning. No words. Just his hand raised. His body sliding into the open angle like he had always known where I would need him. I passed. He caught it cleanly, drove one step, then kicked it back out to Marcus for a corner three. The shot dropped. Coach clapped once. That's the read. Good support, Chris. Good patience, Antoine. My chest did something inconvenient. Chris didn't celebrate. He jogged back on defense like nothing had happened. But for 3 full seconds, I forgot how to be embarrassed. Because he had seen me. Not as a rival. Not as the freshman stealing his place. As a teammate. A very normal teammate whom he had definitely not been kissed by less than 12 hours ago. Progress, maybe. Or emotional torture wearing sneakers. A couple of weeks into preseason workouts, Coach gathered everyone near center. Court after practice. We've got a closed preseason scrimmage Friday night against Westfield, he said. Nothing public, no student section, just a controlled run so we can test rotations. But don't treat it like a pickup game. I want to see communication, composure, and trust. His eyes flicked toward Chris for half a second. Then toward me. My stomach tightened. Chris, Antoine. Coach continued. I'm starting you both in the first group. A few guys nodded like that made sense. It did make sense. Basketball-wise. Emotionally, it felt like Coach had looked at the entire awkward universe and said, let's make this worse. Chris finally glanced at me. Only for a moment. But it was enough. His eyes were still guarded, still unreadable, but not as cold as before. My heart, the traitor, immediately stood up and applauded. I looked away first because I had dignity. A tiny amount. Very fragile. Coach dismissed us, and everyone scattered toward the locker room. I stayed behind to grab my water bottle, mostly because walking beside Chris into that same room felt like entering a haunted house built from my own mistakes. When I finally looked up, Chris was near the doorway. He wasn't exactly waiting, but he wasn't exactly leaving either. For 1 second, we just looked at each other. Then Chris said, quietly, Friday. Be ready. That was all. No mention of the kiss. No softness. No forgiveness. But also no hatred. I nodded, my throat suddenly tight. I will. Chris held my gaze for one more breath, then turned and walked out. I stood there alone on the court, holding my water bottle like it was the only thing keeping me attached to earth. Friday. A scrimmage. Chris and me in the starting group. I had thought facing him after the kiss would be the hardest thing. I was wrong. The hardest thing was going to be standing beside him on the court and pretending my heart didn't still know exactly where he was. Friday night felt nothing like a real game. At least, that was what I told myself. No student section. No band. No cheerleaders. No announcer stretching everyone's name like we were entering the NBA draft. Just our team, Westfield's team, a few assistant coaches, the squeak of sneakers, and the sharp smell of floor polish under bright gym lights. A closed preseason scrimmage. Controlled. Quiet. Supposedly low pressure. Except Chris was standing beside me in the starting group, stretching his wrist, looking calm enough to make me nervous. He hadn't said much before tip-off. Just a short, stay sharp, as we walked onto the court. 2 words. That was all. And yet my brain immediately treated them like a handwritten love letter delivered by moonlight. Stay sharp. Beautiful. Inspirational. Possibly romantic if you were emotionally unstable and had recently kissed your captain in a locker room. Which, unfortunately, I had. The scrimmage started fast. Westfield played physical from the first possession. Not dirty at first, just heavy. Hard screens. Strong box outs. Hands everywhere. The kind of basketball that said, welcome to college, freshman. Hope you brought insurance. I handled it. Mostly. I drove left, got bumped, kicked the ball out to Marcus, then sprinted to the corner. On the next play, I cut backdoor and scored off a pass from Chris. Chris. Passing to me. On purpose. I caught the ball, finished at the rim, and tried not to look like my soul had just received a standing ovation. Good cut, Chris said as we ran back. I almost forgot to play defense. Good cut. 2 words again. At this rate, if he ever said a full sentence, I might need medical supervision. But Westfield noticed me. I could feel it in the way their defenders started leaning harder, stepping closer, using shoulders and elbows just enough that the refs might miss it. One guy with blonde hair and an attitude problem kept bumping me after plays. The first time, I ignored it. The second time, I smiled. The third time, I heard Chris's voice behind me. Watch the off-ball contact. He wasn't talking to me. He was talking to the guy guarding me. Cold. Flat. Dangerous. The blonde guy smirked. It's basketball. Chris stepped closer, eyes steady. Then play basketball. Oh, okay. That was not a sentence. That was a threat wearing a team jersey. My heart immediately forgot we were in public. I looked away before I did something embarrassing, like blush during a defensive rotation. The game got rougher. I caught the ball near the wing and drove toward the lane. The blonde guy slid over late. Too late. I was already past him. Then his hip slammed into my side, and his foot clipped mine. For a second, the court disappeared. My body twisted wrong. My ankle rolled under me. I hit the floor hard, pain shooting up my legs so fast it stole the air from my lungs. The whistle blew. Someone shouted. The ball bounced away. I tried to sit up, but pain sparked through my ankle, bright and sharp. Then Chris was there. Not walking, not jogging. There. He dropped beside me, one hand hovering near my shoulder, his face colder than I had ever seen it. Don't move, he said. And because my brain had absolutely no respect for pain, my first thought was not, my ankle hurts. It was, oh no, he looks like a prince. Not the sweet kind who sings in forests and rescues lost puppies. No, Chris looked like the kind of prince who would calmly burn down an enemy kingdom because someone scratched his favorite person. Not that I was his favorite person. Obviously. Probably. Maybe I was a little curious. Chris looked up at the Westfield player, and for one terrifying second, I thought he was going to stand up and do something that would get him ejected before the season even started. His hand curled into a fist against the floor. Chris, I said quickly. His eyes snapped back to me. I tried to laugh, but it came out weak. I'm fine. You're not. Rude. Accurate, but rude. Coach hurried over with the athletic trainer. Chris helped me sit up, careful but firm, one arm around my back, the other holding my forearm. Every nerve in my body became stupid. My ankle was throbbing, but Chris's hand was warm against my side, and apparently my heart decided pain was less important than proximity. He helped me to the bench while Coach talked to the trainer. I leaned on him more than I wanted to, partly because my ankle hurt, and partly because I had no moral strength. Chris lowered me onto the bench like I was made of glass. Then he crouched in front of me. Stay here, he said, eyes locked on mine. Don't move. Wait for me. Excuse me? Wait. For me? Who said things like that and expected people to survive? I opened my mouth, maybe to say I was okay, maybe to ask if he planned to ruin my entire life with that voice. But Chris was already standing. He turned back toward the court, and something changed. Chris didn't yell. He didn't shove anyone. He didn't waste 1 second looking out of control. He got calm. Terribly calm. The next possession, Westfield's point guard crossed half court, and Chris stole the ball so cleanly the guy looked personally betrayed by physics. Chris drove straight to the basket and scored. Then he picked up full court. Then he pinned a layup off the backboard so hard Marcus actually whispered, "Damn." I sat on the bench with an ice pack against my ankle and absolutely no dignity left. Because Chris wasn't just playing. He was sending a message. Another steal. Another assist. A pull-up jumper from the elbow. A pass through 2 defenders that hit Marcus perfectly in stride. A defensive stop so sharp Coach didn't even blink before shouting, "That's it, Chris." That was him. That was the Chris I had watched a year ago. The captain who made the court obey him. Except now, some irrational part of me thought he was doing it because I had been hurt. Which was dangerous. Terrible. Life-threatening, honestly. The pain in my ankle faded to the background while I watched him tear through Westfield like a controlled storm. He moved like every line on the hardwood belonged to him. Like the other team had made one bad decision, and now he was politely destroying their evening in front of witnesses. By the final minute, our team was up by double digits. Chris dribbled near the top of the key, eyes scanning the floor. Westfield's blonde guy switched onto him. Bad choice. Very bad choice. Chris drove right, stopped hard, spun left, and rose into a clean jumper. The ball dropped through the net. The whistle blew soon after. Game over. Our bench erupted. Guys clapped, shouted, bumped shoulders. Coach looked satisfied, which for Coach meant he almost smiled. But Chris didn't celebrate. He turned away from everyone and walked straight to me. My heart, already severely injured, tried to sit up and introduce itself. Chris stopped in front of the bench, breathing hard, sweat shining at his temples. "You still hurt?" he asked. I looked up at him. Everyone else was cheering because we won. But Chris looked at me like the only score that mattered was whether I could stand. I swallowed. A little. His jaw tightened. Then he held out his hand. "We're getting you checked." Chris's hand was still held out in front of me. For a second, I just stared at it, which was embarrassing because it was a hand, not a marriage proposal. Probably. But after watching him turn into a full basketball disaster for Westfield, then walk straight to me like the whole win meant nothing until he knew I was okay, my brain was not operating under normal freshman athlete conditions. So I took his hand. Chris helped me stand carefully, one arm sliding behind my back before I could pretend I didn't need it. "Easy," he said, his voice low. "Easy. Sir, you just told me to take it easy while holding me like I was something breakable. My ankle was injured, yes, but my heart was the one in critical condition. I can walk," I said, because dignity had apparently decided to make one last appearance. Chris looked down at my ankle, then back at me. "You're limping." "That's just my dramatic style." "Antoine." One word. My name. In that voice. I shut up immediately. Self-respect was beautiful while it lasted. He helped me across the gym while the guys behind us were still laughing, talking, and replaying the last few minutes like Chris hadn't just committed a controlled basketball crime in front of witnesses. Marcus called out, "You good, freshman?" I lifted a thumb. Still alive. Chris's arm tightened slightly around me. I noticed. Of course I noticed. My ankle could have been on fire, and I still would have noticed. The athletic training room was quieter than the gym. All white walls, exam tables, ice packs, tape rolls, and that clean medical smell that made everything feel more serious. The trainer checked my ankle while Chris stood near the door with his arms crossed. He looked calm again. Too calm. But every time I winced, his jaw moved. The trainer gently rotated my foot. "Looks like a mild sprain. No signs of a fracture, but we'll keep an eye on it. Ice, compression, elevated tonight. No full contact practice tomorrow." I nodded. "Got it." Chris said, "How long?" The trainer glanced at him. "Depends how it feels in the morning. Don't rush him." Chris nodded once, like he was accepting a mission from the government. The trainer wrapped my ankle, handed me an ice pack, then stepped out to grab paperwork and check on Coach. And then it was just us. The room got quiet in a way that felt much louder than the gym. Chris stood by the counter. I sat on the exam table with my wrapped ankle stretched out, holding an ice pack like it was the only thing preventing me from saying something stupid. Spoiler, it was not strong enough. "You scared me," Chris said. His voice was so quiet I almost thought I imagined it. I looked up. He wasn't looking at the floor. He wasn't hiding behind that cold captain face. He was looking right at me. I tried to smile. "That's funny. I thought I was the one who got knocked down." Chris didn't laugh. My smile faded. "When you fell," he said, slowly, like every word cost him something. "I forgot about the game." I stopped breathing for a second. Chris's hands curled at his sides. "I forgot about the score. Westfield. Coach. Everything." His eyes dropped to my ankle, then back to my face. "I just needed to know you were okay." My chest did something soft and dangerous. "Oh," I said. "Brilliant. Amazing response. Truly poetry." Chris took one step closer. That night in the locker room, my whole body stiffened. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. "I shouldn't have kissed you like that." "I know." I panicked, and I crossed a line, and I've been replaying it every hour like a very stupid personal horror film. Chris blinked. Then, somehow, the corner of his mouth moved. Not a full smile, but close enough to destroy me. I wasn't going to say that. "Oh," I swallowed. "Then please continue while I pretend I have dignity." This time, Chris did almost smile. Then his face softened again. "I was angry," he said. "But not just at you." I looked down at my hands. Chris came closer, stopping beside the exam table. "I thought you were taking everything from me. My spot, the team's trust, the part of me I still understood." His voice grew rougher. "After the semifinal, every time people looked at me, I felt like they saw that shot. And then you showed up, and everyone looked at you like you were the answer." I whispered, "I never wanted to replace you. I know that now." My fingers tightened around the ice pack. The room felt too small for everything sitting between us. "I didn't just admire you," I said. Chris went still. My heart immediately screamed, too late to retreat. "Good luck, soldier." I forced myself to look at him. "I liked you, Chris, for a long time." My voice shook, but I kept going. At first, I told myself it was basketball. Your leadership, your discipline, the way your team trusted you. I let out a nervous laugh. But that wasn't all of it. I liked how focused you were, how impossible you were to look away from. Even when you were cold and angry and acting like I personally ruined your life, which, honestly, says terrible things about my survival instincts. Chris stared at me. No anger this time. Just something open, quiet, almost scared. Then he reached out. Slowly, his fingers touched mine first, like he was giving me time to pull away. I didn't. Chris took my hand. My brain immediately left the building. "I was scared of you," he said, "because I thought you were taking everything from me." His thumb brushed once over my knuckles. "But today, when you fell, I realized you were the one thing I didn't want to lose." I looked at our hands, then at him. "So?" I tried to sound casual, which was difficult while my heart was actively throwing a parade. "Does that mean you like me too, Captain?" Chris exhaled, almost a laugh. "Yeah," he said softly. "Unfortunately." I smiled so hard it probably looked painful. "For the record," I said, "that is a terrible confession." Chris finally smiled. "A real one. Small, tired, beautiful. I'll work on it." Outside the training room, our team was still celebrating. Shoes squeaked in the hallway. Someone shouted Marcus's name. Coach's voice cut through the noise, telling everyone to stop blocking the doorway. But inside that quiet room, Chris held my hand like it was the easiest decision he had made all night. And for the first time since I joined the team, I stopped feeling like the freshman chasing after his captain. I wasn't replacing him. I wasn't standing behind him. I was beside him. And Chris, the captain I had admired for so long, was finally holding my hand like he wanted me there. Then Chris looked down at our hands, his thumb brushing over my knuckles once more. "That night," he said quietly, "in the locker room, my heart immediately forgot every medical instruction I had just received." "Oh," I said, very intelligently. "That night." Chris lifted his eyes to mine. This time, there was no anger in them. No fear. No wall. Just him. "I think we should do that again," he said. I blinked. "Do what again?" The corner of his mouth moved, almost like he knew exactly what he was doing to me. "The kiss." My entire soul tripped over itself. "Oh," I said again, because apparently that was my only vocabulary now. "Do it again." Chris stepped closer, slow enough that I could pull away if I wanted to. I didn't. Not even a little. Then he leaned in and whispered, "This time, let me start it." And before my heart could explode dramatically across the athletic training room, Chris kissed me. It was soft, careful, nothing like the desperate, panicked kiss I had stolen from him in the locker room. This one felt like an answer. His hand stayed wrapped around mine, warm and steady. And for once, my brain didn't make a joke fast enough to save me. Maybe because I didn't want to be saved. When Chris pulled back, his forehead stayed close to mine for one quiet second. I smiled, breathless and completely hopeless. "For the record," I whispered, "that was a much better confession." Chris looked at me, tired and beautiful and finally not running away. "I told you," he said softly. "I'd work on it."